Welcome to Piros Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're on episode 429, and this is a themed episode.
That's right. We are getting so close to that holiday time of the year. We got Christmas and New Year's and all the fun stuff coming up here, but we're not there yet. But today we're going to be talking about this idea of downtime, right? Because we all have just experienced like a really big surge with Q4. I mean, I've been watching it in our Discord. I've been seeing other people talk about it. Our own sales have been up. But, you know, sometimes the time after Q4 can feel like now I've got all this time that I'm not spending on reselling because I'm not sourcing quite as much and things aren't flying off the shelf like they were. So how can we ensure that we are still being as profitable as possible and setting ourselves up so that our business is going to be successful, even when a dip happens after, you know, reselling is kind of like a roller coaster, right? You got the summertime, things seem a little slow, and then you've got Q4 that comes right after and things really pick up. And so what should we be doing in this time coming up?
Well, there's a lot going on. And I got to tell you, right now we are still in the midst of Q4. By the time this episode drops, it's like peak time, right? It is the time where you have to have everything shipped out by a certain time. I don't
We're a week away. By the time this drops, we're 1 week from Christmas.
Yeah, so right now, people, as they're listening, they're probably packing. They're probably, getting everything together. Because Ground Advantage, right, December 18th is the cutoff point for Ground Advantage. And then for if you have Priority Mail, it's December 19th, right? So this is dropping on those days, right? The 18th is when this drops. So you right now are probably listening to this and everything's peaking. You can't see past today, right? You can't see past tomorrow. You're only thinking it's going to be this crazy, but things will calm down. It doesn't calm down for everybody, right? We always have to have those disclaimers and those qualifiers. But I will say overall, the slowest time of the year, there's only two of them, I think. For me, it's right after Christmas. There's like that 2-week lull. And then sometime in the summer, there's usually like a 2-week where it's kind of like, hey, does my store exist? Do things really sell? But generally, like, this is a time. And so I kind of thought it would be good for us to kind of talk about this because sometimes, you get this feeling like, oh, man, there's no sales coming through. And it's kind of hard to source, right? You can go to the thrift store if they're open, but there's no garage sales. There's not a lot of local deals, technically, because a lot of people are out of town, and so it's kind of hard to get those local deals going. And so I wanted to just touch on what do you do on that downtime. Now, the first thing I do want to remind people is just keep selling, right? If you're still at home, right? If you're not on vacation, if you're not spending time with family and you're at home, like, keep selling because there are still sales that come through. One example I can think of is 2 years ago, I traveled to Wisconsin to meet my good friends from college, and I was there from like December 27th to about January 2nd, and I had taken a ton of pictures. I probably had like 100 items in my drafts, and every day I uploaded those drafts, and I was having the same amount of sales while I was away that I had in Q4. So I had about, it wasn't not close, not exactly 100%, but it was kind of like 15 sales one day, 10 sales the other day, 20 sales, whatever. And the reason I was having those was because even though I had put my store on vacation mode, I still allowed for sales. You can allow it for up to 15 days, and they're still coming through. People still had either gift cards or maybe they had some money now that they got from, their grandparents or, in their stocking or something.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, like, when you are looking at the few days right after Christmas or even right after Christmas, there can be another spike in sales, but especially if you've got like unique items or like collectible items. Because I remember the very first time I had Christmas with my in-laws, but when I first got with my wife and very first Christmas, like, they did stockings that night, and it was like in the stocking was like $100 bill, and that was the first time I had gotten like cash for Christmas other than $5 from a grandparent or something. Yeah. But then I know that's how a lot of people are. Like, a lot of people get gift cards, but then a lot of people still do cash, like you got an aunt and uncle and people send cash. And so I remember as soon as I got that $100 bill, one of the first things I did after, everything kind of calmed down is I went on eBay and I bought some stuff that I had been looking up, right? Because it's like, now I have some cash, I can buy it. And so I was buying on Christmas because now I've got some money. And so, you gotta make sure that you're still keeping that store going, because you never know what kind of sales might start picking up as people see, hey, I got some gifts, and some of that gifts allow me to get what I really, really want, which is what I've been kind of stocking on eBay for a little bit.
Yeah, and a lot of people would say sales continue on through the end of January, and I would say that's very true. We are going to have in the future here. We're going to talk about why I believe, and I think Mike is on board, that reselling is going to thrive even more in 2025. I personally feel, based on everything here, the confidence has been brought back into our economic world. I just saw the other day, like SoftBank's investing, I don't know, 100 billion or whatever the number was. Like, there's a lot of businesses that are seeing an economic forecast of things picking up again. And so if that's the case, and you got to act as if it's going to happen anyways, right? Especially if you're a full-time seller, just because things slow down doesn't mean you have to slow down, because you never know. You always want to be ready. And I would say the same, even if you're a part-time seller, like this January could be great. eBay had forecasted less sales than usual. They forecasted that they were going to make less money than they anticipated earlier on in Q1 for Q4. I think we're going to be kind of surprised at the numbers that come out in whenever they report that in the end of January, early February. So, but even if that doesn't happen, that doesn't mean that you won't have a lot more sales, right? Just because the overall macro picture looks a certain way doesn't mean that the micro picture of your small business can't continue. So continue selling, continue taking offers, continue and doing what you've been doing, especially if you don't have anything going on. I mean, this is even a better time to take advantage of that, because some people will be away and have their stores on vacation mode, won't be shipping right away, and you could take advantage of that time in the meanwhile.
You get that unfair advantage, right? So yeah, not everybody can do that, and I'm a big advocate for, if you're not full-time, definitely take some time to step away from reselling for a few days or a week to enjoy the holidays. But yeah, if you're full-time, keep that unfair advantage and be selling when others aren't. And then one of the things you should do, because there will be a little bit of a lull, is you got to keep momentum going, right? Like if you're used to, over the last few weeks, like you might start feeling burnt out, but if the last few weeks you've been putting in like days, right? Because sometimes reselling, we say we're full-time resellers, not me, but like I know a lot of full-time resellers like, yeah, I'm full-time. And a lot of times what they mean by that is this is my only source of income. But there's some weeks where they're putting in less than 40 hours a week. Maybe some days where I'm only working 2 or 3 hours today. And then other days where, times of the year where they're putting in 12-hour days. So it's kind of an up and down. But if you can kind of realize like, okay, I've been putting in like at least 8 hours a day for the last week or so, or a couple weeks because of Q4, things start to slow down. Don't stop spending that time. You've already got that momentum. You're used to spending that time, but shift the time from saying, hey, now I'm packing all my inventory that's selling, to maybe I need to do some other things related to reselling that's going to get my business running smooth when we hit Q1 of 2025. And one of the first things you can do is just organizing your inventory. Do I have everything organized? Especially after a big Q4 rush, you might realize like, hey, I've sold a bunch of stuff. Now I've got some half-empty totes. I've got shelves and racks that maybe got a little bit disorganized, and I've sold some things here and other. And so you can start to consolidate some inventory down, maybe re-go through your custom SKUs, make sure that you've got everything labeled and organized so that way you're good to go. And that way when sales start to pick back up again, you've got an efficient system. And you're not, and it really gives you a good picture too. When you organize your inventory, part of that to me includes your death piles, right? Do you know what you need to list? Do you have a plan for listing that out? And I think a lot of times resellers, I've seen this multiple times. I've talked to people on the Discord. I've talked to people who've done this. They kind of think they're maxed out on inventory, and then they start to go through stuff and they realize like, I have a lot of space here. I've got unutilized space because I've been selling things, but I haven't been replenishing these totes. I've just started a new one. And now I've got some space that I can get some of these death pile items listed, sorted, and you'll be in a better place. So I would say one of the first things you can do is use some of this time you're already used to spending on reselling and just shift it over to getting your organizational system really, really running smoothly, because almost nothing is going to have as much of an impact on your business as having a smooth organizational system where things are just running like a machine. You know where things are, everything's organized. If you can save 5-10 minutes every time an item sells because it's easy to find and locate and ship, even organizing your space, that is going to add up over the year, and you're going to save tens if not hundreds of hours. So organization is extremely important.
Well, and that's the beauty of doing it right after a crazy time, is you realize where the gaps were, right? You realize the times where you're like, you were looking for something and it took you 3 hours to find it, or when you had to cancel the sale, or you couldn't find, your shipping supplies that were supposed to be located here, or it's just one of those moments. And I've had those moments right now over Q4. So for example, like I thought I had my bubble wrap organized in a certain place, and I ended up moving it somewhere else. And then when I needed it for the next day, it wasn't there. So I had to order overnight bubble wrap for a lot of my sales. And so it's just one of the things. And I remember one Q4, I had one of those awesome 3-hour experiences because you can't find a certain item and it's worth money, right? Usually if it's like under $50, I'll cancel it after, if it takes like 20 minutes for me to find it and I can't find it, I'll just cancel it, right? Because it's not worth my time.
That's awful, Orlando.
Well, it is what it is. But if it's over $100, you bet I'm gonna be spending the next couple hours looking for that item, right? It's you don't want to you don't want to lose that money. And yeah, not $50 is nothing to balk at. Like,
but you're also potentially risking negative hits on your store too, though.
I know, but I haven't had it, and usually I've I've been blessed by the fact that I haven't had any of those issues yet. It's been actually pretty good, pretty good. My feedback has still stayed the same. On a side note, what's funny is you ever get those positive negatives where it's like, I'm so glad I got this item, but it took a while to get to me. And it's like, wait a second, like either you're happy or you're not. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you do get a positive negative, please contact eBay. They're very good about eliminating the comment. So they'll keep your positive feedback, but they'll eliminate the comment. So it's just like a blank space. And I had a few of those this Q4 where like one was like, I really so happy for this item, but it took forever to get here. And I look, and it was when I was on vacation. And so I would call eBay. I'm like, well, obviously it was going to take a while. I was gone for a week. And so eBay's like, oh, we'll take care of it. No problem. But you want to make sure you take care of that, because that can look really bad if people are looking at your feedback trying to figure out, do I want to get this shipped out to myself? All right. Going back to what we're talking about, organizing inventory. So inventory check is one of those things you should be doing. Okay, now, it's a monumental work. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable. But I will tell you, when you do an inventory check, so inventory check is basically you go to your eBay store and you make sure you filter it out. So you could do it by, your custom SKUs, or you could, whatever way you organize things. And you make sure that every single item that you do have in your totes or wherever are actually listed on eBay, right? That you actually have that item, make sure it's not damaged, make sure everything's okay. I know for some people it's a lot. Like for me, doing an inventory check is kind of crazy. Like it's, I have 2,500 items. I'll do inventory check for like stuff that's in totes. I'll do inventory check for my stuff that's in a closet, the stuff that's easy to get to. And the reason I say this is eBay listings do fall off. I don't know what the reasoning is. I don't even know why it happens. But all the time when I do these checks, I end up finding, I'm not kidding you, like this isn't an overestimate, probably like 30 to 40 items that just aren't listed anymore. Like, I don't know, like when did these fall off? Did somebody buy it and not pay? And maybe I canceled and I didn't relist it. I don't know. I don't know if it's operator error. I don't know if it's eBay just saying, hey, this item's been on here too long, but it happens to me all the time. And you're losing money. Sometimes you'll get lucky and you'll find something that fell off and it's actually worth more now than it was when you had it listed. But chances are, either way, you're losing money, whether it's worth more or not. The fact that item was listed on eBay one time and it's taking up real estate space, but it's not moving, like that's not a good thing. So definitely do that inventory check. But it is work. Especially if you're kind of like me, where you're organized in the fact that you can always find your inventory, but you're not organized in the fact that you don't have like when you bought it, how much you paid for it, like, every single little detail on there. You're like, I just put a custom SKU and I just throw things in that tote. And that's all I do. I don't get into the many details of the items that I have. So, I don't know. Do you still find things every once in a while, Mike, that have fallen off? And you're like, wait a second, I thought we had this listed.
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't say it's as much as you, but I also have a smaller store. But there's definitely times when I'm looking through a tote and I know that everything that's in that tote has been listed, but then when I go to look it up online, I don't find it. Yeah, that's definitely happened with a handful of items, and so it is a good reason to do an inventory check. And you also got to figure, I mean, think about it. If anybody's ever worked retail before, or if you've ever been in a store during their audits, and they have people who are like employees, but they're like not wearing employee outfits, and a lot of times they're like you're not supposed to like mess with them. Not a lot of times they're almost in like, I don't want to say civilian clothes, that's not right, but like regular normal clothes. They're not in like uniform, and they're scanning items, and all they're doing is just counting, right? It's like, how many of this item, how many, because they want to see like the shrinkage. Has there been stuff stolen? Do we have the right, like what we say we have in our store, do we really have? And part of that's tax purposes. And so regular businesses do that, right? Like that's part of annual part of every business is going through their inventory and double checking what they have. Now, do I think you need to go to that level and extreme all the time for all of your items every year? Maybe not, but if you've got the time, it's definitely worth it, because yeah, like you said, if you've got some items that you are pretty sure you had listed. I mean, I've had the opposite happen where I know I've taken something off and for whatever reason it still sells, and I'm like, wait, no, I took that off. And so it is a good idea to just double check your store. And if you're going through and doing, like we've said, with things like ending and sell similar, or adjusting your prices on a regular basis, even if you've got 1,000 items in your store over the course of a month, unless you're listing an insane amount of items every day, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what you have, right? Because you're seeing your inventory on a regular basis. You're like, yep, those jackets, those hats, those. And eventually you might be like, when you're going through your inventory, just organizing, you might be like, I haven't seen this hat. Like, why is this hat that I'm seeing in front of me right now? I haven't seen that on my eBay store in a while. And when I'm doing the ending and sell similar, I have not relisted this. And so those kinds of things could just be, helpful for that. Another thing that you kind of want to consider as you're moving into a slow time, and especially as you start to move into the new year, is making sure you're set up with all of your shipping supplies that you need. We talked about getting all of your shipping supplies before Q4, especially if you've got like unique shaped items, or you're going to be selling a lot of a similar type of item. Then after Q4, you could have depleted a lot of those items. Maybe you didn't go through as many poly mailers as you thought you would have, but you went through most of your shoebox size boxes or something like that. Or you went through a lot more tape and now you've only got one roll left, or you need more batteries for your scale. Like, you really need to make sure you've got all of those shipping supplies, because you can really blast through a lot of those things in Q4, and you want to move into the start of a new year ready to go. Now, do you probably need to order the whole year's worth of shipping supplies? No. Do you need to and maybe you could if you've got the space for it and you're getting, tax write-off for it, and you need it for that year. There may be reasons to like try and plan a year out in advance, but even just making sure you're good to go for the next couple of months, and just taking that inventory of your shipping supplies. Okay, how much tape do I have? How much bubble wrap? Okay, I'm running low on bubble wrap. Now's the time to get those stuff purchased and ready to go at the start of the year. Because it's slow now. So if you get a random sale of an item and you realize you're out of those size boxes, or you're running low on bubble wrap, it's not the end of the world to run to Walmart real quick and buy a box or buy some bubble wrap. But if all of a sudden a bunch of sales are coming through and you're doing that a lot, it's going to be a nightmare. So you definitely want to double check your shipping supplies and just get an idea of how you did. And also, I would write this stuff down, right? If you recognize, I went through however many rolls of tape, I went through X amount of rolls of bubble wrap, I went through. That way, going into the next Q4 and the following Q4, you already have an idea. Okay, the last 3 Q4s, I went through 3 rolls of tape. I went through 2 rolls of bubble wrap. I went through, and just having a general idea so you're not guessing every year.
That's funny. I'm like 3 rolls. I wish I only had 3 rolls of tape. I usually am going like through like 72 rolls of tape. Probably more. I don't know.
But you're abnormal with how you do your tape, though.
Well, that is true. But I mean, I will say when I did FBA, it was like 200 rolls of tape. So I am abnormal.
But there were times where you'd go through like half a roll of tape on one box. So
hey, you know what? As long as it arrives safely, it's all good. And it's funny as I we're talking to this episode. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't want to hear this," and I get it. Like, I understand, because the fun part of reselling is like going outsourcing, right? Finding those treasures. Right, making those sales. But what keeps you going is these things, right? Because if these things aren't in order, like, they will overwhelm you. and you're gonna be like, I don't know if I want to deal with it. I think of one of our listeners. Hopefully, they still listen. They said they still would. Who's quit reselling, and one of the reasons they quit reselling is they got tired of going in their house and inventory was everywhere. Like it was on their kitchen counter, it was on their kitchen table. Like they'd sit in the living room, it's on their coffee table, and they said, once I quit reselling and I got rid of all the inventory in my house, I felt so much better. Like I never want to be a reseller again. But if you decide to organize your stuff, right, you decide to keep your living spaces, right, it's a lot more manageable, right? It doesn't consume you, and that's the same thing here goes with bookkeeping. I will tell you, bookkeeping, if there's anything that will break me when it comes to reselling, it is bookkeeping. So before I talk about that, I do want to talk about one of our awesome friends that always are there for us. My Reseller Genie. My Reseller Genie is bookkeeping software. Bookkeeping software made by resellers for resellers. If you haven't checked out My Reseller Genie, you can use our code Pure Hustle and you'll get 15% off the first month. That's Pure Hustle. You'll get 15% off the first month. It'll allow you to import all your eBay information. It'll allow you to track your profit and loss, and it's a great tool. So if you haven't checked them out, check them out. My Reseller Genie. Go to the link below, or just go on My Reseller Genie and use our code Pure Hustle for 15% off the first month. But bookkeeping, I know for me, it is the worst part of reselling. It's just terrible. I just I don't know. I would say if I was wealthy, I'd rather just like pay like somebody full time. And I know some people get CPAs, but I don't feel like it's worth. I mean, out here in California, things cost a lot more than they do if like you're in Texas or you're out in the South or somewhere else. But bookkeeping, right? This is something you can get started during this downtime, right? Whether it be you finally decide to get My Reseller Genie, whether it could be you decide to import all your listings, whether it means, you know what, you weren't the best at tracking your mileage, but now you're going to pick up software, like you're going to pick up the app like MileIQ, or I don't know if it's Everlast. I don't know. I think that Everlast, was a singer from the 90s. But anyways, you find something that's going to help you track your mileage, right? You look at your profit and loss. Like this is the time, because April's going to come around and you're going to feel super overwhelmed, right? If you're saying, hey, you know what, I'll get to it, and I'm speaking out of personal testimony of myself that, the last 2 years I've always ended up, asking for that extension because I didn't spend that downtime, right? I was like, oh, I'll get to it. And next thing you know, it's April and I'm telling, my tax person saying, hey, can you just file an extension? We'll get this done by October, right? But during this downtime, it's a perfect time. Things are still fresh in your mind too. You're not playing this whole like, oh, I'm trying to remember things. You're going through like bank statements. You're going through credit card statements, right? You have, hopefully you have My Reseller Genie. You have a way to track everything. And then on top of that, if there's gaps, it's easier to find the gaps when Q4 just happened than trying to remember 2 or 3 months down the road, right? You want to start that bookkeeping as soon as you can. Or even, while you're reselling. But this is for the people out there that haven't and they wait, like me, until they need to.
Yeah, it's never worth it. I mean, you got two things. Like there's that, what's the effect where the task will fill up the amount of time you give it, right? I can't remember the name for it.
Is that a real thing? Okay, I didn't know. Well, no, that does happen. Happens all the time.
No, we've talked about it on our book reviews, right? Like if you say something's going to take, this is due next week, then you take all week to do it. But if you say this is due tonight, you get it done tonight, right? Like the task will expand based off of the amount of time you allot to it. So if you give yourself a tight deadline, it's going to happen quicker. And if you have something hanging over your head for a month, especially if you're trying to get like an extension on something like your taxes, it's just going to end up crushing you, right? It's temporary relief for like you're just pushing off, and who's to say you're going to be in a better place a month from now, 2 months from now when you're trying to finish your taxes then. All right, so yeah, if you're using something like My Reseller Genie, it's going to take 99% of the weight off your shoulder. You've only got a little bit left now you've got to be taken care of, but yeah, you want to be on that stuff as it's happening. But a lot of times you look back and you realize, hey, 2024, I did not keep on it the way I should have. So that's why like we're going into like the perfect time, right? Like we're going into a start of a new year. If somebody's not using something like My Reseller Genie, sign up, use our promo code, try them out, promise you, you're going to enjoy it. And then start tracking your mileage now, right? Because everybody says, well, I'll do it next year. I'll do it next year. And then you get like 3 months into the year and you realize you haven't done it yet. And then you're like, well, it's too late to start now, even though it's not. And then so you push it off and then you kill yourself on tax time trying to get it all done. And it's like, if you'd have just spent a couple of minutes every couple of days, you'd be good to go. So yeah, definitely get on it now, especially as we're moving into the start of a new year.
All right. So again, bookkeeping, like Mike has said, it's something you just want to be on top. My goal is this next year, especially as my life will continue to get busier, is to be more on top of it, so I don't have to stress about it much. Hey, before we move on, we are gonna have our awesome hustle of the week. It's kind of weird because we did these last week in our live, and so then we're doing 2 weeks of hustle of the week. But that's how many opportunities are out there, right? That there's a never-ending supply of hustle of the week. So don't I always hear people like, oh, I'm never gonna find that grill, I'm never gonna find that treasure. No, it is possible. People do it all the time. But before we move on, if you haven't been following us on social media, we are Pure Hustle Podcast on all platforms except X. On X, we are Pure Hustle Cast. And as always, grateful for all of you that tune in to the podcast. But if you haven't yet, jump on over to YouTube. It always helps us out when people, like, subscribe. My goal was by the end of the year to get to 10,000. I don't think we're going to reach 10,000, but at least by 2025, we should get to 10,000. That means we only got to pick up like 800 or something more subscribers. And also, if you haven't yet, you can always give us a call with your hustle of the week or any comments or whatever. We like hearing from people that tune into our podcast. So if you haven't yet done that, jump on over 619-738-1170. That's 619-738-1170. Or you can shoot us an email at purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. That's purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. Always grateful for with these hustle of the weeks that we get to. The emails are pretty awesome. And even like last time we had comments about the feedback and what's going on with eBay. And if you haven't yet left us a review on iTunes, it helps us in the algorithm. Please do so. You go over Apple iTunes, give us that 5 stars. Hey, by the way, we're back at 4.9. I want to let everybody know. I didn't like it. We dropped to 4.8. I like to get us back to 5.0. So if you enjoy the podcast, only if you enjoy the podcast, come on over, leave us a 5-star review, and let people know why you enjoy the podcast. Now, I do want to share some of these reviews. I always think it's fun to read these, not because it makes me feel good, but sometimes people leave interesting comments. It says, this is from vintage_wild. They said, great and real. They said, great show, not all teaching. There are plenty of times they tell it like it is. It's happening. Some folks can't handle the truth. Emoji, laughing face, emoji, laughing face. You guys are doing great. I appreciate that because I say that all the time. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm not going to fake it. Like, I'm going to be, hey, things are bad, they're bad. And if things are good, we're going to celebrate the good. This comes from Wipesima Mama Bear, something like that. I'm sorry if I messed it up. It says, my favorite reseller podcast. And by the way, I appreciate when people say that because there's a lot of reselling podcasts. Remember when Mike and I entered the game here, there was only one. It was Scavenger Life and us. And then Scavenger Life, decided that they were going to move on. And then out of nowhere, like tons of podcasts. So appreciate every single one of you that tune in every week. Here they said, I've learned about so many strategies for increasing profitability in my resale business from Orlando and Mike. They are clear that this is not a do no work and get rich kind of business. The tone of the podcast is informative but relaxing. I appreciate that. It is my go-to for my hour-long commute. Okay, and one more here. This last one comes from I'll do Hex Ty B. Oh man. Oh, I love these. I love the. This is my favorite. Mike needs a new partner. I learned a lot about reselling with these guys. They certainly share their sides. Orlando's a pain to listen to, but fun to listen to, and frankly, motivation to be better. So, was that a jab? I don't know. Was that a jab in recovery? I don't know. Whether he's doing good or bad, he's always has something to complain about. Reselling takes work, and when work becomes present, he seems to always say, it's tough. It's called work, Orlando. Do it or get out of the way. Woo. Wow. But you know what? You left a 5 stars, so I'm good.
You took it like a champ, Orlando. I tell you what, I've definitely gotten thicker skin over the years doing doing the podcast, because every once in a while you get comments and you're like, oh, ouch, that hurts. Oh, wait, not anymore. My skin is like leather. I don't feel anything.
But
I
it
have
is
armor.
True. This is why I think there's a disconnect sometimes. I see reselling as a hobby, right? I never want to work hard. I don't. I work hard. And Mike will tell you, like, I pure hustle is what I am. Like, I hustle all the time, but I will only do things that I believe like it's gonna sound terrible, that like are enjoyable, right? Like, so for example, when I was a teacher, I love being a teacher. I never worked hard because I enjoyed what I did. It never was like taxing. It never was like, oh man, I'm so miserable, I don't like this. No, I loved every moment of it, so it wasn't work for me. And the same thing with reselling. Like, I love reselling. I just don't like all the side quest stuff that, you know, eBay makes you jump through all these hoops. You got to do bookkeeping. You got the government on you about your taxes, like all this craziness. I don't like it, right? That's work to me. But do I mind? I don't mind going out there hustling, finding treasures. I don't mind out there packing shipments. Like, that's good to me. But for me, it's like, hey, life's too short for me to be stuck in something I'm miserable in. Like, I want to serve, and I want to serve where I'm called, and I want to thrive in it. And to me, it's all about thriving. And so, yeah, when I get those moments where I complain, that's all good, because that means at that moment in time, I don't feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But I'll tell you this, when I was in the classroom, when I've been reselling, when I've been in administration, like, I never found it to be hard work. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but it was enjoyable.
Yeah, you're no David Goggins, that's for sure. But you do put in the hours, so that's... You just need to look.
I don't even know how to take that.
You just need to carry the logs in the wet sand a few times, and then you'll develop that grit. You gotta start taking souls, man.
People like David Goggins annoy me.
Yeah,
because it's like not everyone's built like David Goggins. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, somebody yelling at my face and cussing me out to stop being whatever. That doesn't motivate me. I would just want to punch you in the face. I'm not motivated by that, So, anyways,
takes all kinds, man. Takes all kinds.
But it's all good. And some people now will comment that Orlando has, soft skin and he can't take a comment. No. I like the banter.
Somebody's gonna say that you've called out David Goggins, and hey, maybe David Goggins will do a little thing about.
I'll be real. I will never punch David Goggins in the face. That's for sure. I will say, I'm sorry, sir. Like, I'm sorry. Thanks for the motivation, and to move along. Like, I'm not messing with David Goggins, man. I feel like David Goggins could have both arms like tied behind his back, like his ankle's broken, and he'll still beat the living daylights out of you. Like, that's David. He'll start headbutting you until he'll pull a Jack Bauer on you and take you out.
Oh, this got very action packed this episode. All right, you ready for some hustle of the week?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Come on, hustlers. It's the freaking hustle of the week. Yeah. Hustle of the week. All right. Our first one comes from Upstate Picker from Instagram. So it says, I've had some great sales over the years, but this has been the top sale of 2024. I've owned this game since new, but the cartridge is buried somewhere in the attic. Given the current market, it was time to let the box go. Sold a Toxic Crusaders box and manual only. It was a Nintendo Game Boy 1992, so no game, just the box and manuals, for $1,381.88.
You got to say 1,381.
I mean, 1,300 works. 1,381, $1,381. That's a lot of money.
Do you know
that's
what
a lot of money for
Crusaders
a box?
Is?
I don't. Yeah.
Right? It's the guy that like something happened with radiation, radioactivity, and like he has like a mop and he's like a superhero or something. I don't know. I remember watching it on Sci-Fi Channel when I was a kid, but it is pretty unique.
Kind of looks like a zombie, huh?
Yeah, but he's not. It's just a guy that's been deformed because of radioactivity. Toxic Crusader, hence the name.
Gotcha.
So, but no. And Upstate Picker's good friend of the podcast, been listening for years, and we talk back and forth on Instagram. But yeah, what a sale!
If the box and the manual is going for that, man, imagine what the game's going for.
I don't know. And here's the crazy thing is, I thought the top game, right, was Pokemon, right? Like, I sold a bunch of Pokemon, like, just, boxes and manuals for like 500, 700 a piece, for a lot of money. I thought that was the, top of the pile. I thought there's no way you could get something better. But apparently there is more, and it is Toxic Crusaders. That's right? Crazy. Did you look it up? See how much it's selling for?
Oh no, I did.
What
I
you
was
come up
just
with?
I was just looking up images and I saw some eBay listings. It's crazy because I saw Sega Genesis box. I didn't look to see if it had the game too, but they were asking a lot less. So it must be that the Game Boy.
Oh yeah,
that
the Game Boy
1992
Advance.
Game Boy
Yep.
must have been more of a sought after. That's crazy.
Well, here, so the game itself, if you find just a cartridge, I'm seeing sold listings, it's $400 just the listings. And here's the thing, I'm looking through here, like I don't see any sold listings for boxes, right? So my guess is that it's pretty unique. Let me go to the unsolds. I'm pretty sure if you go to the unsolds, there might be a couple. But yeah, okay. So here's the thing: somebody is trying to sell the box. Complete in box. Yeah, so the game and the box for $2,700. So he did the research and he sold it for good money. I mean, I see a box here just for $1,100, but I don't see any other boxes. The manual, $140. Somebody's trying to sell it for, which I do think it's probably worth it. So it's a bolo. There you go.
That's right.
All right. Hey, nice work there, Upstate Picker. All right, this comes from Secondhand Solo from the Discord, my good friend who is my competition out there, and I haven't been out there in a while. He actually, when I told him I was going to share this on podcast, told me, you don't need to get out there. You got death powers, Rolando. So, and he's not wrong. He's not wrong. Secondhand Solo from the Discord said, went to a garage sale last month and found a table full of vintage machinist tools, micrometers, cutler bits, etc. I've sold vintage watchmaker tools for good money, and this stuff had the same look. I found a few decent comps and decided to take a chance. He wanted $80, and of course, in good reseller fashion, I countered that with $60. Nice work. LOL, I was stoked that I got everything for a decent price, but truly had no idea what I really had. I got it listed a day or two later, and immediately stuff began to sell. Within a week, I truly realized what I had. At this point, I'm $30 away from clearing $1,000 on the score. Beautiful, Secondhand Solo. From 60 to 1,000, you can't beat that. And I would have passed on these machinist tools, so that's pretty awesome.
That's fantastic. All right, our next one comes from Dave from the Discord. What a great title there, Dave from the Discord. I like that alliteration. A few months ago, while cleaning out a home after an estate sale, there was a corner of the basement filled with hundreds of empty boxes from floor to ceiling. It was a 5,500 square foot home with a fully finished basement. When broken down, the boxes filled 2/3 of a 16-foot box truck. Almost all were empty. Some were filled with paper trash. But buried deep in the pile, one caught my eye with the words written in marker, Silver Pine by Stainless Metal Craft, Incorporated, 7-foot complete. So it was a 7-foot tall aluminum Christmas tree. So Stainless Craft is one of the rare manufacturers from the early 1960s. Only 2 have sold on eBay over the last 3 years, only 1 listed currently. It's got 192 branches. It's blue and green, shiny, beautiful tree. Sold it locally for $1,300. Good
Beautiful.
grief. Yeah. That's man, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Yeah, no, and it's a nice tree too. Like, I don't know. It's something I wouldn't have thought about. And again, the local game, like, don't sleep on the local game. Like, there's money to be made. A lot of people talk about the local game all the time. So, all right. Hey, by the way, before Mike and I share our hustle of the week, we didn't share about our Patreon. So if you're wondering, like, these people that are from the Discord, well, they're from our Patreon, right? So if you go to patreon.com/Pure the Podcast, or you go to link below for $5.55 a month. I do think prices are going up in the new year. Mike and I haven't discussed this, but I do think they're going to go up, and we'll figure out a manageable number. But it's still going to be a great deal. $5.55 a month. I mean, what's that? That's like, you can't even, maybe you can get a McDonald's, that one meal that gives you like enough for a snack. Okay, so if you haven't checked this out yet, go to our Patreon, sign up. It helps us. Mike and I have produced 429 free episodes since the beginning, on top of all the other videos that we've made on YouTube, and it's been possible because of listeners like you. So if you haven't yet signed up, make sure to sign up. Again, patreon.com/Podcast, or go to the link below to give an entrance to our Discord.
Yeah.
All right, Mike, what is your hustle of the week?
All right. So I've kind of been getting into, I mean, I'm in Texas now. I haven't got into like cowboy boots and cowboy hats yet as like selling or even wearing. I don't know if I could ever pull off wearing those things. I feel like I might feel like a fake. But I have gotten into like wearing boots. So I've the boots that I typically wear they're Clark's boots. They're the Bushacre or like the desert boots. Like I like the way they look. They're relatively inexpensive. But I wanted to update for a while now to like a nicer pair of boots. And so I've been researching various boot brands. And I came across a boot brand called Thursday Boots, which is like a great middle of the road. I feel like they're like maybe a step below Red Wings. They're not like quite that level. As far as, but you're going to spend a couple $100 for a pair of boots. Anyways, I was at a garage sale a couple of weeks ago, found a pair of Thursday boots, unfortunately not my size, but in really good condition, and I picked them up for $10 and was able to sell them for about $120 plus a little bit of shipping. So from $10 to $120, man, that is a great hustle. Plus now I could take that money that I made off of it, put them towards the pair of Thursday boots that would fit me. And it's almost like a straight trade. I mean, if I were to buy used, I could get a pair my size right now. If I want new, I'm going to be paying a little bit more. But that's what I've kind of had that paradigm shift, because I used to think when I would go to like thrift stores or garage sales and you find something that you want, but it's not in your size. But if you sell it and make the money and use that money to buy it in your size, you're pretty much getting a straight swap. So it still works out. And I was glad I learned about that brand, Thursday Boots. They are definitely a bolo as well.
They're all over my Facebook.
Really?
Like all the time. Like all the time. Like
that's good advertising.
So yeah, but I haven't bought any yet. So.
Yeah. I don't really picture you as a boot guy, so.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Well, I'm in San Diego, so I'm a sandals like all the time.
And I'm telling you though, the Clark's Bushacres, you can get them sometimes on Amazon for like $40 or under. They're the most comfortable shoes I've ever worn in my life, and they look super sharp. So they look good in like if you're wearing dress clothes. I'm a teacher, so I wear dress clothes. They look nice in that, but then I can also wear them with jeans. I can wear them like out and about, and I do all my yard work in them. Like they're nice.
This has now become a fashion show.
That's right.
From motivation to fashion to reselling.
Yeah, don't wear stripes and polka dots together. That's your tip for the day.
There you go. All right, so my hustle of the week, I always, sometimes I share the big sales, but sometimes there's some things that sell that are like, yes, I was right about this, and this is one of them. So I went to this garage sale, and it's somebody who has a bunch of storage. They go storage hunting, and they have some inventory they don't want to like deal with on eBay. They just do it at a garage sale. And you ever seen like on a mantle at somebody's house during Christmas, they have like these lights that go across the mantle, right? But it's kind of like it looks like it's a white like band or like a white paper that goes through. It's not necessarily just a light. It's kind of like this. I don't know. It's a mantle light. And you can't really find those, right? That's like old school. That's like back in the 80s, kind of 90s kind of look. And so there was this bag full of them. I think there was like 20 of them in there. And I asked the guy how much. He's like, $1. Who's, no one wants those, right? So I picked those up and I go, you know what? Even if I sell one, like I'm golden. Well, I ended up selling, so far I have sold 8 of them. Right, and I've sold them for a total of $152, right? So I'm happy with that, right? I turned $1 to $152, easy to ship, right? And I'm also providing something for someone that they wouldn't be able to get anywhere else, and so I'm very pumped about it. Like, and when these things sell, I'm like, yes, like I didn't buy junk. I took a gamble, right, on something that I was like, you know what, someday somebody's gonna look for it, and within 6 months of me buying it, because it's a Christmas season, I ended up selling them out. So I sold. They're called Sheer Glow Mantle Christmas 50 lights wire ribbon end-to-end connector. So somebody knew what those were, and somebody wanted them for their mantle, and so I have sold many of them, and I still got a few more. So, just happy to sell those. All right. Hey, if you have any hustles of the week, be always, understanding that you can shoot us an email or you can give us a call. All right. So we got a little more to talk about here. What to do in the downtime, Mike.
All right. Let me jump on this one. I think this next one's pretty big. Okay. Now is the time, especially since we just talked about the idea of getting your taxes in order and kind of getting everything set up. If you've been keeping track of your taxes, you kind of should have an idea of where you're at, what you're going to be able to, write off, how much you've made during the year. You should be able to look and have a pretty decent idea by this time of the year. And one of the things you can do is make sure that if you need more tax write-offs, you're buying the things now, right? I'll give you an example. I put the mini split out here in my eBay room where I do the podcast, and I bought that mini split in the summer because I needed it in the summer, right? Like that's when it was hot. I needed an air conditioner out here. I still use it all the time. However, it's a tax write-off, right? I purchased the item, I installed it, all the tools I needed to install it. That's something that I needed in order for my business to run well. And so I was able to write that off on my taxes. And so there may be things that you might be thinking, hey, you know what? My old laser printer, maybe I should upgrade to a thermal printer here pretty soon, or my photo box, I need a new photo box, or I need some shipping supplies, but I don't really need them until maybe February. Now might be a good time to start buying the things that you need to buy in order to get the tax write-off for the 2024 year, right? Because if you wait to buy the things, and you may have a better year next year and you might need to get some more tax write-offs, but the more you can write off this year, more expenses you can write off, the better your taxes are going to be. You're going to be able to keep more of your money that you earned. So ideally, you obviously don't want to make poor purchases. But now would be the time that if you need to do any upgrades, you need to get a new, phone so you can take better pictures, any of those types of things, consider doing those things now because you're going to see the benefit of that right away when you're having to pay your taxes in a couple of months. So it's definitely worthwhile to buy the tax deductions now, get that out of the way, which means you might need to spend a little bit of time to figure out, hey, what are my taxes going to be? How much am I going to be owing? Maybe I didn't make as much this year, so I don't really need as much tax write-off, but I'm anticipating a better year next year because I've been sourcing a lot. So there may be reasons to wait for big purchases for the following year. But if you can and you're in a position to, I would purchase the things you need or the wants that are going to be beneficial to you as long as you can afford them, and do that now. Because then come April, when you get to write those things off and you keep more of your money and you're not spending as much to the IRS, it becomes very worth it. So I would say buy those tax deductions now, figure out what you really need, and get it done.
Yeah, and I would say, buy that G-Wagon. I'm joking, but make those big purchases, right? Those big purchases that definitely help out. I'm a big fan. I eventually will get a new car. And, it's obviously going to be used for work, right? But there's certain cars that you can deduct more than others. So make sure to talk to your tax professional. Now, this next one, this is something I remember last year. I made an effort to kind of take a look at what I sold throughout the year. And I found that for myself, clothing was really tough for me. And I know a lot of people are killing it in clothing, but I don't know if it's because I've been sourcing, what was hot 5 years ago. I don't know what the reasoning was, but I saw that I was doing a lot better in collectibles and toys. And I also realized that throughout the year, as I was looking through the garage sales and things that I was picking up, that those were the ones that I was making a lot more money on. Clothing, yes, comes cheap, but clothing can sit for a while because there's a lot of competition. But collectible toys and stuff, if you're able to negotiate a good price, you can make back your money within a week or 2 weeks, depending on what it is. And I remember this time last year, reflecting on that, and I talked about it, I believe, on the podcast, and said, hey, I'm going to be switching up a little bit. I'm going to moving away from clothing. I'm going more to collectibles. And you know what? It was a good call. I truly believe it helped out. Even though I had that crazy dip in April, things have rebounded, and this Q4, it's been crazy. And they haven't been massive sales. I've had hustle of the week kind of sales, but a lot of it has been, $20 toys, $30 toys, $15 toys, but that I've only picked up for pennies on the dollar, right? And so I sold a ton of them. And the reason I did that is because I actually took the time last year to take a look at what sold throughout the year, what I was doing better at, what I sourced well. So I encourage everyone, reflect on your sales, reflect on your sourcing, reflect on what sold, reflect on what's been available. Because sometimes maybe this last year you realize that things you used to be able to source easily, it's not available anymore. Maybe because a bunch of resellers caught on, or maybe just because it's just not there anymore.
Yeah, and I'll briefly mention one of the goals I talked about having this coming up year. I want to do and have my house paid off in 5 years. And so sometimes you're setting short-term goals, but sometimes you need to set up a longer term goal and then break it into mini goals, right? So that you can make sure like, am I on task to what I need to do? So you may have like a grand goal, like, here's the amount of money I need. Okay, so then what categories do I need to be in? Okay, and maybe I need a goal to learn a new niche because the niches I'm in are only giving me X amount. So having a big goal will help you set smaller attainable goals. And then the other thing too is even just recognizing, for instance, and I'll talk more about this as we do like our New Year episode, but okay, if I want my house paid off in 5 years, I could say, okay, well, my goal is to make an extra 20% like of the house value in my eBay store every year. Well, I also could take this and look at it a little bit more realistically and say, hey, but I know how eBay works and it scales to an extent. So if I can make 15%, if I could pay out 15% of the house this year, and then the next year, year 2, I've scaled, I've built more, I've got more inventory. Now I'm at 20%. And then by the year 3, I might be at paying off 25% of the house that year, and then actually exceed the goal, right? So you want to be realistic. You want to set goals. And then if you have a big lofty goal, break it down into smaller manageable chunks, break it down by year, break it down by month, break it down by week, figure out what niches you need to be in, and even small things like my goal is I'm going to list X amount per day, and figure it all out, break it down. And one of the only ways you can do that is to reflect. You're only going to know where you can go if you can figure out what it is you've been doing to get you to where you're at. Because you're going to have to keep some things the same. You're going to have to adjust a few things, and you're going to have to completely adapt other things. So you're not going to be able to do that unless you're reflecting.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things where it's I think it takes work. Like it doesn't. You're kind of like done. You're like, oh, I just want to relax. And I think there's a time for that. But we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, I will say it is a time to kind of source those off-season things, like a lot of Christmas stuff. And this is really tough. You got to be on it. But people do look for Christmas stuff after Christmas, right? And so sometimes I find that like when I go to Facebook Marketplace or other, local deals that people are trying to offload some stuff after the Christmas season, and now is the time to source that stuff because you can get it for good money, right? Or even if you go do some retail arbitrage, you can pick up things for on the cheap, right? 50% off, 75% off, and those things are going to sell for full retail a few months later. Okay, so definitely start sourcing that. And I said source off season. I was just saying, hey, source those things that right now people aren't thinking about, right? They're not looking to the future. They're just focusing on this Christmas holiday season because there's a lot of money to be made during this peak time. And you make the money during the buy. You don't make money in the sale. You make money during the buy because it gives you room to negotiate. Oh. All right. And one more thing, and then we'll get to our last one. Take a look at your listings. I've said this before. I think one of the reasons I had such a rough year too, earlier in the year, not the second half, was because my prices were just crazy. They were off. They were in 2020 stage, right? Like I had priced things when things were hot, and it wasn't until I finally started going through my prices, going, yeah, you know what? I kind of need to adjust my prices, right? Or maybe you take a look at some things and you're like, you know what? Those pictures, that's probably why that's not selling. Or maybe you find that, you have a lot of items that you didn't have on best offer, or, a lot of items that you weren't running sales on. Like take a look at your listings because this is the time, because again, things do peak again for a lot of people on eBay in January. So you have that small lull, that little window of time, and you can adjust things, which may end up bringing even more sales than you would have during Q4 in January.
Yep.
So this last one's is this last one controversial, Mike?
No, I think this is a big one too. And I'm a big advocate for this. Is you need to relax, right? Like you need to take a little bit of time to yourself. I at the top of the episode, I mentioned the idea of keeping momentum going. If you're already used to putting in 10-hour days, you put in a couple more 10-hour days to get your inventory organized and to get your taxes looked at, right? Like keep that momentum going for a little bit. But you also don't need to keep it going 24/7, 365, right? I mean, we're not David Goggins here. Like sometimes it's okay to say, hey, I'm going to take a couple days off. I'm going to take a week off. I'm going to, maybe still let my store sell, but I'm not going to pour everything into it. And you know what? I'm going to spend a little bit of time with family and friends this holiday season. And worst case, I lose out on a few $100, but I'm still making ends meet because my store's running smooth and things are going. I'm just not as optimal as I could be. But eventually, if you are going nonstop all the time, you're running suboptimally and you don't even realize it. I've mentioned this a lot of times with things like sleep. If you're one of those people, like there's a very select few people who are like genetically able to actually go off of 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. Most people need like closer to 8, 7 to 9, somewhere in there. And Orlando, I know like you stay up late. You're not always getting your 7 or 8 hours of sleep.
No.
And you might think like, hey, I'm running fine. Like I'm only getting 5.5 hours sleep, but I'm fine. Like I've been doing this for years. And it's like, yeah, but you might actually only be running at like 85% efficiency. You don't realize it because that's just the normal to you, right? Like we adapt to the normal like pretty quickly. And if you were to actually get a few days where you're getting the right amount of rest, you get some head clarity, and you realize, wait a minute, now I'm firing on all cylinders. I'm 100% efficient. That extra hour or 2 hours of sleep, I actually make up for that like within a few hours of work because my brain is just functioning better, and I didn't realize I wasn't there. And so the same thing is true on a bigger scale too. Like if you can take a few days off, you could take a week off, not just things like sleep, but just to detach. And sometimes that's where your best thoughts come from. That might be in that moment of, hey, you've kind of stepped away from reselling for a little bit. You're not like just going all in. And then you're like having a conversation with somebody. You're like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if there's like, maybe I should look into that niche and start reselling that. And then it allows you to be a little bit more open-minded and kind of come at things from a fresh perspective. So sometimes you do need to step away from things. I'll never forget. You remember Zelda Ocarina of Time, the video game?
Yeah,
that one of the first games I beat, like start to finish, beat the game after having to restart because the water temple a couple of times. But I'll never forget. I was like a kid, and I'm playing this game, and I couldn't beat one of the temples. Like I just couldn't figure out one of the little puzzles, and I was sleeping, and in my sleep, like I saw how to solve the puzzle. I woke up and sure enough, that was it. And it's because my brain had been processing it so much, but because I was thinking and I couldn't do it, I actually had to step away from it for a little bit before my brain put all the pieces together. And so all of that to say, take a little bit of time, step away for a little bit, because sometimes you get to come back in with the right headspace and you're actually going to be able to tackle reselling in a way you couldn't have before.
Yeah, no, I got to tell you, it is so important. To me, the nicest vacations are during the slow for me. Like every single time I've had it, it's been crazy. It's been a crazy time, and then it's been a nice, quiet time, and sales have come through. But it's like you're not stressed, right? Because you made a nice amount of profit during Q4, right? And then you making a little bit of extra money during those 2 weeks, which feels kind of nice. And it's just wonderful, And I know this year I'm probably going to do a little bit of that. I'm going to probably step away from. I'm still going to keep my store on vacation mode, but I'm going to probably take a little trip here and there. I'm not 100% sure. It might just be a staycation, but I'm just going to take it easy, right? And I'm going to do all these things. Like, here's the thing: whenever Mike and I share these themed episodes, we're not just like putting these together based on like what we see other resellers doing. We actually do these things, like. You know, and I speak out of like honesty and authenticity because I've had to endure like the terrible bookkeeping. I've had to have those moments where Mike talks about like you only sleep 5 hours a week. 5 hours a week, 5 hours a day. I can't function like that anymore. Like I need at least 7.5, right? So, and if you've been running this whole time, like you want to be ready for January. You do not want to feel like a zombie. I will say, the time right now, you should be zombie mode. Like if you got to work 23 hours a day and get an hour to sleep to make those sales to kill it in eBay or Amazon, and you know, I'm not giving you health advice, but if you're able to swing it, like now's the time. You're not going to get sales like this for a while, right? Maybe you might get some in January, but it's nice to just slow down. It's nice to actually, you know, enjoy the fruits of your labor, right? Book that hotel, book that travel. Like spend time with your significant other, with your kids, you know, just so everybody knows, you know, this is why we do reselling in the end, so we can have this time freedom, so we can enjoy all the hard work and relax over this break. Hey, everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you haven't yet, make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe if you're not subscribed. Stay tuned to our episodes over the holidays. We're still pumping out some episodes because that's just who we are. And with that being said, make sure to be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling. Peace.
Hustle Podcast guides our quest, learning tricks to be the best. On eBay we make our name, reselling dreams.